I don't usually write a script for my videos. Most of the time, I prefer to go off and improvise what I will say. However, if any video will need a script, it will be my review of Alan Wake 2. Not to mention, as I write this, I am reading it in my head in Alan Wake's voice. That remarkably buttery smooth voice. I'll be splitting this review into distinct sections, one being gameplay and the other story. So if you prefer to hear my thoughts about one more than the other, you can skip to that section instead. I also advise that there will be spoilers in this review. However, it's one of those rare instances where it would be a struggle to genuinely spoil this game. As someone who completed it, I'm still not too sure of what actually happened. Such is the style of the Alan Wake franchise. So just a bit of an overview regarding Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 picks up 13 years after the events of Alan Wake 1. FBI agent Saga Anderson and her partner Alex Casey have been deployed to Bright Falls to investigate a string of murders perpetrated by a local cult. Saga's investigation soon puts her on the trail of missing writer Alan Wake, who vanished in Bright Falls 13 years ago. However, as you investigate, you find it all quickly begins to spiral out of control. Out of the investigation emerges the supernatural, and out of the supernatural emerges a multitude of otherworldly horrors you'll have to face as both Saga Anderson and Alan Wake. When it comes to gameplay, I'll start by saying that Alan Wake 2 is a genuine masterclass in game design. From the time-looped, spiral-style gameplay you experience as Alan Wake in the Dark Place, to the open-area nightmare that Saga Anderson experiences in the real world. With Saga, you have her Mind Palace, or her Mind Place, as she refers to it. It's an imaginary room inside her head that helps Saga build her cases, get into the mind of a suspect, and solve crimes. It also acts as a hub to check any extra content found in your investigation, such as pages and manuscripts. You could look at it as a somewhat stereotypical ability for a detective to have, but like most of Alan Wake 2, there is a deeper meaning to it waiting to be discovered, and it is played off in the story beautifully. The caseboard is a great mechanic to play with. It's an intuitive way of getting the player to explore all of an area so they can fill out numerous caseboards and come to deductions that will progress the story and unlock side content. It's also useful should the player need guidance in progressing with puzzles, something I had to do frequently. Again, that's a me problem right there. Alan has a similar mechanic called the Writer's Room, where he needs to rewrite the story to escape the Dark Place. But when the story changes, so does reality around him. Alan rewrites areas of a Dark Place to a different version of that same area, opening new sections up to discover more of the story, find new secrets, and secure his escape. It's visual storytelling in a game at its pinnacle. All the more impressive when you realise that the designers had to create all these different versions of the same places, and they all had to work in the story itself. The game constantly threatens you with a scare that will always hit you when you least expect it, especially when the boss of a particular area starts to show up. It starts slow, small glances from afar, a disembodied warped voice of a Taken coming from any and all directions, and then invading your screen, popping up uncomfortably close to a camera, screaming at you from the depths of the darkness. I absolutely love this kind of horror. It's the kind of horror that reaches out through the screen and can almost touch the player. I loved every single scare this game got me with. Put it this way, I've never thrown my hands up in front of my face before and screamed, "Oh no," at a video game before, until this one. My partner was in the room next to me, it was embarrassing. The combat in Alan Wake 2 takes the best parts of the original game, the parts that made it iconic and unique, and perfectly fits them to a modern third-person shooter template. Weapons feel great to use, with each one upgradable through the player exploring the world and finding torn-up pages, or in Alan's case, words of power. The standout is nailing a shot with the crossbow. It is remarkably satisfying. The Taken make a return in Alan Wake 2, and they feel slightly more formidable this time around. Instead of getting swamped by dozens of them like in the original game, in the opening stages of Alan Wake 2, one Taken alone can be formidable and more scary than their last iteration. Using the light to make them vulnerable makes a return and feels more streamlined with its own activation button, free of the aim button like how it was in Alan Wake 1. And thanks to brilliant sound and lighting design, it feels much more satisfying when used. Overall, with combat, it plays very similar to other third-person shooters of the same genre, with some clear inspiration taken from 2019's Resident Evil 2 remake. It takes an already tried and tested horror game formula, but adds its own Remedy flair to it, and the end result stands out to me as being the most satisfying horror third-person shooter I've played this year, and Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space both came out this year. Where the game really shines is in its beautiful environments, as I briefly touched on earlier, but the amount of detail Remedy put into both Bright Falls and The Dark Place to really make them come alive is just expertly done. Like Baldur's Gate 3, I firmly believe it sets a new bar for what's possible in its genre, and games as a whole. The Dark Place is confusing, mind-bending, and ever-changing, cementing the feeling of a nightmare. It's a place you know but twisted and pulled apart to an unsettling degree. Similar to the oldest house in Remedy's previous game, 2019's Control, it feels like the designers have taken everything they learned from building that to perfect the art of making an environment feel like its own living entity. One part of The Dark Place that stood out for me was in Initiation 4, We Sing, which I feel is a testament to Remedy playing to all its strengths, which I will expand on more in the story section of this review. Bright Falls is familiar yet different for those who played the original game. It's more open, split into 3 distinct areas that the player can freely explore at points, and thanks to modern day graphics, it looks stunning but also remarkably terrifying. One standout for me was Coffee World, which is a low budget abandoned theme park. It wasn't the part of the game that scared me the most, but it was the one I resonated with the most, with its unsettling, creepy vibe that I feel almost everyone can resonate with. As in real life, it feels as if every town has its own version of Coffee World. Overall, I can find no weak points in any of Alan Wake 2's gameplay. It feels borderline flawless. One slight criticism I may give it is its sound issues on launch. I had to restart the game a few times as the audio just outright stopped working, something I initially thought was a feature of the game. This eventually got patched, but it did rip me out of the immersion a little during the opening sequence. The story is Remedy at its very best. It is scary, wacky, and at points, completely off the wall insane to the point you have no idea what is going on or what is actually real. The story feels like a culmination of all their efforts with their previous games, mainly for its fantastic use of multimedia. I enjoyed how live action was slotted into the original Alan Wake and Control. But with Alan Wake 2, Remedy takes it a step further. Instead of feeling gimmicky, it feels like an essential part of the experience. Most of Alan's story actually takes place in live action, with excellent performances by all involved, especially David Harewood, who plays the enigmatic Wallin Door, the host of the late-night talk show in The Dark Place. The live action sequences are arguably the game's most memorable moments, especially the Alan Wake chapter, Initiation 4, We Sing, which I briefly mentioned in the gameplay. This section is an outright musical collaboration between all the major players in The Dark Place. Sung to the tune of the best video game song released this year, the chapter completely contrasts the rest of The Dark Place. It is bright, colourful, hopeful, and absolutely bonkers. I couldn't help playing this section with a massive grin on my face. In one of the scariest games of the year, this section feels like it shouldn't work. Yet it does, and it is brilliant. Playing as Saga and then going back to Alan, they sometimes feel like 2 different games, 2 different experiences, which in many ways was probably the point. I initially wondered how it would work by allowing the player to swap between their stories on a whim, yet it actually does work, with the plot working around whatever the player decides to do, and with the designers making sure that the experiences are distinctively different, and it works very well. In terms of writing for the characters, it is as solid as possible. You feel yourself genuinely investing in their plight, from Alan desperately fighting to break out the spiral and escape the Dark Place, to Saga fighting to stop tragedy, as the story she has been forced into starts shifting her life and reality into something much darker. A standout moment comes late in the game, with Saga in the Dark Place. Instead of being hunted by some otherworldly monstrous horror, the Dark Place uses her self-doubt and inner fears to break her down. She inevitably overcomes it, but is a moment that can resonate with many people, as they are both very real monsters that most people fight daily. Remedy has stated that you don't need to play any previous Remedyverse games to understand the story of Alan Wake 2, but really, having played all of them, enhanced my enjoyment of this game tenfold. I was able to enjoy all the small references, all the teases, and overall, I understood and invested in the story more because I had played them. So if you are going to pick up Alan Wake 2, I highly recommend you pick up Alan Wake and Control, and also its DLC, as one of them directly relates to Alan Wake. Alan Wake 2 is a very late contender for Game of the Year for me personally. Originally, my Game of the Year was Baldur's Gate 3, along with most of the gaming population, by the looks of it. When I initially wrote this review, it was directly after finishing the game, where everything was still very fresh in my mind. I was worried that when I read this review back, that it would come across as very much a product of the blinders being on and the experience making it more than it actually was. But as I've read this out loud, I can't help but agree with every word I've said. Alan Wake 2 has moments that will stick with me for a very, very long time. So much so, I wouldn't be surprised if next year's Spotify Wrapped told me that my most played artist was the Old Gods of Asgard. I have got them on repeat lately. If you've never heard them, go on Spotify, listen to some of the tracks they've done for Control, Alan Wake 1, and Alan Wake 2. They are absolutely phenomenal. And with that, I'm ending the video. Whoa, 20-minute recording. I'll probably dock that down to like 5 minutes. And that's it. Thank you all very much for watching. Bit of a different video than usual, but I hope you have enjoyed it nonetheless. If you have any thoughts about Alan Wake 2, or I feel like I missed anything, because as I read it, I feel like I'm jumping a lot from point to point, and, you know, yeah, let's have a chat. Why not? And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video, whenever that may be. This actually may genuinely be the last video of this year, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you very much. Bye now.